In 1984, in Pembroke, Massachusetts, 59-year-old Virginia Ginny Hannon lived alone. She had been a widow for the last 13 years after her husband Joseph died in 1971. They had no children together. She was truly alone. She did have family nearby. I believe she had a nephew who looked after her, and she had friends and a social life. She would go out to church and dinners, but she also had a lot of alone time. She had been a lunch lady at Brantville Elementary School, and she had retired from there in the early 80s after receiving a large sum of money from an aunt of hers that had passed away, to the sum of $380,000. But despite the inheritance, she still lived very modest. She lived in the same small home that she had always lived in back with her husband, and stayed in the same small vehicle, a beat-up old car, and continued to live small. She loved playing bingo and spending time with the family that she had left, barbecues and whatnot. However, she had one fatal mistake and one fatal flaw about her personality, in that she was far too open and trusting with people. She would often tell people that she had just met about the inheritance that she had. And it was also speculated that a lot of the money was not in the bank, but somewhere on her property in her home, hidden. And that leads us to Saturday, February 11th, 1984, when Ginny and her friend went out to evening church service and then out for dinner afterwards, which is a common theme for her on Saturday nights. She would often do this. At around 7:30 p.m., Ginny's friend dropped her off at home, and that was the last time she'd been seen alive by anyone other than her killer. Because 2 days later, on February 13th, 1984, Ginny was found brutally slain in her home. She had been beaten, strangled, and stabbed to death. She'd also been kicked in the stomach, hard enough to leave a shoe-shaped bruise on her body. She'd been stabbed 6 times in the abdomen and once in the eye, and she also had a nylon stocking tightly tied around her neck. She was not sexually assaulted, however, and this murder appeared to be motivated by robbery. Someone had obviously heard about this large amount of money that she may have had in her home and decided to go take it for themselves. It's believed that the killer beat and tortured Ginny until she gave up the location of the money that she had stashed in her home. Following this murder, the community was obviously shocked. She was beloved in this small town. Everyone knew Ginny. She had spent a lot of her time over the years, when she was home alone, baking baked goods, cookies, and whatnot for the neighborhood kids. She'd also baked a lot of snacks and such for stray dogs and different animals in the neighborhood. So this was just shocking. This is not a common occurrence in this small town. And so the police took this to heart and really got busy. They talked to over 100 people, and unfortunately got no meaningful leads from it. And this murder would go unsolved for over 30 years. It would go cold. And in 2019, evidence from the crime scene was finally examined for DNA. They had found blood on different items in the home that they believed was not Ginny's. And so they tested it for DNA, and they found out that it was indeed not Ginny's. It was the male perpetrator of this crime. All the blood in the different spots matched up to one male perpetrator. Unfortunately, when they ran this DNA profile through the system, there was no match. So what do? They turned to genealogy. And I think that's probably where you think this case is going, but I do a lot of genealogy cases where they solve the case. This is not one of them. They were unsuccessful when they tried to solve this case through genealogy, and it would take a really unexpected turn, this case, when on February 4th, 2020, 36 years after the murder, a call was made to police. The man on the other end of the phone said that his friend, 58-year-old Jesse Aylward, had just died the day prior in the hospital. But before he died, while on his deathbed, he had confessed to that murder, that brutal murder 36 years ago of Ginny Hannon. Jesse Aylward was 22 at the time and had grown up in Pembroke and lived not far from Ginny. He had had prior convictions for assault, but all these years he was a skilled handyman. He owned a brick paver installation company and had just gone on living his life. It's not known how much money he got from Ginny during that murder, but this case likely would have never been solved if it weren't for him confessing to this on his deathbed. And after the police got that call and got that information, his body was still fresh. He just died at the hospital the day before. They ran to the hospital, gained some DNA from him, and matched it up with those blood samples they had seen they had gathered from the crime scene back in '84, and they were a perfect match. And this case was finally solved after all these years. But unfortunately, justice was not served. Obviously, this guy got to live out his life. However, he died at 58. So that's the one piece of solace, is that hopefully he had some sort of an aggressive, painful cancer that took him at 58 when he could have had many years left. But that's karma for you. So that's my case. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.
You hush your mouth, boy.